Hey everybody, thanks for watching. And just a quick update. Guide to God is almost sold out. So if you want to pre-order that book, it's almost gone for pre-order. So make sure you get it. It'll probably be done today after this video, as well as the Self-Inflicted Religious Deception, volume 2. So if you guys want to grab that before they sell out, make sure you get them because they're going to go quickly. Put out updates for everybody who's still waiting for books or tracking numbers. As I said in the email, you guys will get it. I appreciate your patience and support. If you order the book, don't stress, don't worry. You will get it. You will receive the email as soon as it ships. So I appreciate the support and patience. Also, these books released, the pre-orders are already half off. So people who already got the pre-order, you got it half off already. When they release again, they will be at full price. So that's why I'm telling you guys, make sure you grab it. Right now for pre-order, only the pre-orders will be signed books. There won't be no signed books after the pre-order. So get it. It's going to sell out just like the last one did, and it's almost sold out. So make sure you guys grab it. The link is in the description, if you want to get the book. Now, I want to get into this video because, before we get into the video, talk about some quick stuff. So you guys been paying attention, hopefully, to what's happening and what Putin has been talking about. This is the most important thing you need to really be looking at, is what's happening with this whole gas thing, because they're going to use it. And I'm going to talk about this in the next DVD, in the next video. Not going to get into too much here, but they're going to use this. And you have to look at what they're telling you could lead to war. What can happen, the whole chemical attacks. And one of the things they're going to have to do is to get support for this, because, at this day and age, we are not trying to do, any type of war. Nobody wants to fight in any wars. So, Putin announced Thursday, I think it was, that, they are not going to be accepting payment for crude oil and, dollars or euros. They're going to switch over to rubles. Now, it's mismatch and, all kinds of crazy stories about this, because he told a couple countries that they could still continue to pay in euros and dollars. But it was this announcement. So we don't know exactly what's going on. But this is big, because if this happens, and supposedly they're giving people countries a week, to, put together this type of plan to where they'll be able to pay in rubles or gold. And it's big, because now sanctions won't matter. A lot of people don't realize that Russia is the second largest producer of crude oil, next to Saudi Arabia. So if they can get, gold and their own money to be paid in, for crude oil, then it's cool. I mean, they already made over 120 billion, 2019, I think it was, in sales. So they're going to be fine as far as the economy and bringing in money. And this is a big step for them to do that, because it makes people having to depend on them as far as, anything that's going to happen with us. You got to pick the poison. You can be allies with America, or, you can keep on getting what you need from Russia. And it's kind of thinning out, allies and who we can count on. We know that Russia just sold a bunch of oil to India at a discount, and they are having a lot of people interested in, what's happening with this oil thing. So you got to remember and go back to Trump administration, when he basically blocked them from building a pipeline from Germany to Russia, which, that's a strategic move. And when Biden came in, and he basically rescinded that and allowed them to build this pipeline. So now, if it comes down to it, the EU can get the oil from Russia, which we really don't want them to do that. And we don't want them having to come across, let's say, NATO countries to bring oil. So the pipeline would make sense, since, it's a whole conflict of interest with Russia. You got to remember the last time something like this happened, where we had Saddam basically said we only taking gold dinars for oil invasion. We invaded Iraq, we bombed them, and I was in the military at that point. So it's crazy when you look at what's happening, and it's always a repeat situation. They always follow the same type of MO, and there's a lot of planetary activity coming up. So it's probably going to coincide with what's coming. But I don't want people by no means to think this is just letting up or it's over. It's coming. Something that's happening. You can see it, just as I said before with the whole virus thing, which, by the way, they already reporting that, record low numbers in hospital visits. Corona is dropping and so on and so forth. And we're going to segue into something else, and that's how it goes, just as I told you guys. So pay attention. And get a lot of questions from people that's in the military, a lot of friends, a lot of people worried what's going to happen, what's coming. Yeah, I mean, we'll get into it in the video. I don't want to say too much here, but you can kind of sort of see what could possibly lead to, any coming issues and the questions that's being put out there. And, as you can see, they're starting to, bring Israel into this fold. We're going to get into all this. There's a lot going on. So a lot of people was distracted by the Oscars and all that. And, stage situations, whatever you want to call it, whatever you choose to believe what happened there. But it's a lot more stuff going on, and expect prices to go up. We're going to have a little break because you have an election coming up. And a lot of these people that's being elected to Congress, they play on both sides, and they playing their part, and they're trying to act like they want to, do something. But yeah, it's going to be chill until after this. And once people get in there, we'll see what happens. But, expect prices to keep rising. And the more it rise, the more people are going to say, we need to do something about this. Understand? So, any way they can get us into it. It's always a way or reason to get us into war. And this might be one of the reasons. So we can't look past that. We got to understand what's on the table and how this can affect us. And, for people who, you don't take the bus, or you don't really use too much gas or what have you, or you have a Tesla, smart people, it's not really a big deal, but it's going to become a big deal because it's not just for, fossil fuels, or let's just say for gas, that people use, crude oil for. It's a lot of different things, a lot of stuff that we use it for. And it's one of the things, one of the reasons why people have been calling for an end to fossil fuels and a crude oil. And I think we're going to get there at some point, because it just don't make sense when we already have proven technology that, we could have hydrogen cars and cars that run on water. So water, electricity, what have you, natural resources. So, the production of crude oil to gas and everything like that. I mean, it's a process. It hurts supposedly hurts nature and so on and so forth. We got to worry about a whole bunch of stuff, oil spills and so on and so forth. To do away with all of that, a lot of people would definitely want to, but you can see how it's being used to control the situations that we see war-wise. So a lot of stuff has happened because of it. A lot of wars have sprung up because of it, and another one is possible. And it's slowly, as you can see, coming away from the issue with Ukraine, and it's going to really, it's going to be a big issue with, with oil. And if Putin does this, and you have to look at, Saudis, and the Saudis being where they are, you have a competitor, and having a competitor with this crude oil thing. I mean, Russia, number 2, and crude oil productions. They can basically do what they want, which is going to force Saudi Arabia to adjust prices or change, or, choose sides. And, everybody really, when you pay attention, Russia kind of leading this thing. Like they know what they're doing. So look at Saudi Arabia and what they've been talking about, as far as they've been talking about this for years, by the way, as far as working with Russia. And, if Russia just decides to come out and say, hey, we're going to discount oil just to cut the legs off of America. And we know they're going to run to the Saudis to get oil. So we're going to undercut them. And if you come work with us, we can do this, so on and so forth. And who knows what that's going to cost. It's going to be a huge problem. A lot of people are going to get involved. And it's a weird situation when you look at it as far as, allies. So you could have a situation where people be neutral, or people have to choose sides, and we don't know what's going to happen. So it's a lot to this, but we'll get into it. So, thank you guys for your patience and support. And as I said, got you guys on these books. You will get it. Don't stress. Don't worry. It's coming. And let's get into this video. I speak a lot about Egypt and what happened and where things seem to have began. And clear as day, we see everything changes after the fall of Egypt. You have to understand that we don't get biblical religion and all that until Egypt falls. There's no way that they can prove 100% that you had Hebrews and Judaism established during the time the Egyptians ruled Israel. It's just not going to fit. So we understand conquest and what happened and the fall of the Egyptian empire at the hands of the Persians, where you had the ancient Egyptians and the Greeks living together side by side, and the Egyptians teaching not just the Greeks, but everybody, culture and science and everything else, math and what have you. And eventually they would stab us in the back. And this would be because the Greeks gave the Persians the keys to the kingdom, you might as well say, and allowed the Egyptians to be conquered. But it's deeper stuff to that as we get into with the videos, because it's almost as if when you dig deeper, the Egyptians allowed this to happen or knew it would happen, the higher ups, I would say, because the pharaohs and the people in the mystery schools, they changed their entire way that they were buried and the funerary process, which was, a big deal to them for a long time. So for them to change it and to prepare themselves as if they wasn't coming back here, it's a big deal. And it gets into what I talked about and the agenda and that whole thing. Again, it's stuff you got to understand in order for it to make sense. But I got off of the subject because I got to understand a lot of people's minds are not ready to accept that. If you followed it and understood what I said, then it's up to you to accept it or not. If you start looking at the world and the way things are, and what my overall point was in that video, it makes sense, because you got to ask yourself again, why would black folks do this? Why would they seemingly sell us out? Why would they go inside with these white folks throughout history? We're not just talking about Jay-Z and Oprah and all these other black celebrities. We're talking about throughout history. Because in order for Egypt to fall, they had to help. Black Egyptians had to help. And a lot of people ain't going to want to accept that, but it's the only way when you understand that civilization and how shit worked. Somebody had to help them. And you dig deeper, a lot of people say, what's the Moors? They stabbed us in the back and they had ancient knowledge, which we'll get into that in this video a little bit, what happened with the Moors. And the Moors were kings, which we'll get into that as well. But stuff fits, and you got to look at it. And it's like, okay, well, damn, why throughout history we see this, not just us, the Asians, which we'll get into, and everybody else seemingly bow down to this. But there's a deeper understanding that's really going to be hard for people to grasp and understand. The reason why I'm where I'm at in life is because I understand that and I move forward. I get what's going on and I understand it. And there's a lot of rules to it, and it's deep and it's scary, and a lot of people are not ready for it. So I sort of backed off of that track. I'll pick up on it after I put out more videos. And as I feel like more people are looking at everything so they can understand my overall point of what I was talking about in the agenda. And, for people to understand that and soul purpose and everything else, because, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I know everything. I'm, all knowing and all this and that, and everything I'm saying is 1000% true. But I give you guys enough proof in my videos for you to make up your own mind and do your own research. And I make what I say make sense. So on that note, we're going to continue here, but you got to look at history and understand why it's whitewashed. It's the big deal. But the fact that it was, and all of that information, what it entails, because it's a lot of stuff. But we know you had the, the Greek Empire before it's black people. We know about the Etruscans. We know about the city of Carthage. We know about the Carthaginians, you want to call them. But we know about these civilizations being black and ruled by black people and what took place. So again, a lot of people don't want to believe the Ice Age story about black people going up to the north and getting caught in the Ice Age and losing their melanin and coming back down or what have you. Something happened because you have these Aryans coming in, and then you have a lot of researchers from back during that time talking about these people coming down from the north, the Aryans, and mixing in. We know with the Hyksos this happened. The Hyksos, when they ruled Egypt, they ruled as mixed people. We know that it was talk about this, about the Canaanites mixing in, and the Phoenicians mixing in, and that it wasn't a big deal back then because nobody could fathom what was taking place or, what it was all about. It's people trying to live and, survive. So the Egyptians had the knowledge, they was teaching, but they couldn't fathom the agenda that was on the table for the Europeans, from the Europeans. And, it gets deeper because a lot of people are not going to see, what took place because history, again, whitewashed. But fast forward, and we know the Etruscans and what's known as Rome were black, and that history is out there. And then you have these major civilizations in North Africa with, the Egyptians, and then you go to Europe and you have the Etruscans, and you have Carthage, and you have, the Greeks and the Romans, so to speak. So if you are, and then we got to go over to Indus Valley and look at the black people there in India, so on and so forth. So you got to step back and look at the plan. You got to look at everything. And it's amazing. And it's still, again, fits in what I'm trying to tell y'all, because how the fuck did they do this? How? And one of the biggest things is, as I talked about in the video, is with the Chinese. These people have, their entire history is war against each other. Their entire history is war. We're talking about going back to the freaking 23rd century, 2000, 2300, BCE. They're fighting each other, and so many dynasties slaughtering each other. Why? What's taking place? What's going on? So you got to look at this, and then, white man walks in and, hi, we're going to mix in with you. Let's do this. And then they just accept it. Why? So those are deeper things to think about, to ponder. But we have these civilizations, and they're looking at it, and they have to conquer all this, and they have to first infiltrate it all so they can gain conquest. So this is where they started. Come down in this valley and begin this way, and they spread east and west. Plain and simple. They spread east and west. But the Indus Valley is where we look to where they started to come down. And the Indus Valley first, and then start to move over towards Egypt. But the Indus Valley is where they're kind of sort of pinpointed at first. But we know, of course, they was in Greece, and we know they was in, Rome. But they really start to lay their roots more where we start to see them with the Indus Valley, and start building conquests and spreading over there. Because remember, they will become the Persians. So those areas are not talked about much because it's primitive stuff that's going on. Of course, we're going to talk more about Greece and Rome because a lot more stuff happened there. So with the Etruscans, I'm going to read here. Just a real quick pick. Just talking about here. The Etruscan people populated a large region of what is now Tuscany and Lombardy in Italy. But they're probably not what you picture in your head when you think of Italians. Strong evidence suggests that the Etruscans were dark-skinned people who traveled from Africa to settle parts of Europe. Not only did the Etruscans' settlement predate ancient Rome and Greek civilizations, it greatly influenced the culture of Rome. The contributions of black culture on the Roman Empire have sadly been whitewashed by Eurocentric historians. Now, for those of you who understand who Sheikh Anta Diop is, he already put out a lot of information on how Aryans spread over and mixed in with the Chinese, and that's how the Chinese got light, and the whole migration pattern of the Africans out of Ethiopia and where we went, and so on and so forth. And that this mixing in with white people is how pale skin came about and so-called yellow skin. And it's common sense. And it's common sense of what happened and what took place. But it's not just in Asia, and then not just in Indus Valley, because we look at everywhere, and we gotta realize, and it's one of the things I talked about on YouTube. You gotta remember we were everywhere. This was completely Black folks everywhere. They systematically went out and mixed in with every people on the planet. This was their thing. This is what they did. And they mixed in with the Asians, mixed in with the Indians. They mixed in with North Africa. And they went over, went down to South America. They mixed in with the Australians. We follow this migration pattern of the Eskimos coming. I talked about this before. It was a ice bridge that basically was too big to cross, that separated Canada and the United States. It was an ice bridge there. And once it melted, you was able to just finally, come straight over from Alaska to Canada and to the United States. And that's what the migration pattern shows. And then the migration pattern also shows them going over through Asia into Australia, but then down from Australia over into South America. The way you look at it on the map, you can go from Australia to Africa, and then from Africa, into the lower part of South America. And they would basically migrate up through South America into Mexico and the Americas and what have you. And this is like early civilization, the way they look at it. But, still civilizations that was built there. So we can't look at all that and skip, Peru, Hawaii. You can't skip the Philippines, because when you go back and look at all these places, dark-skinned people, as recently as the 17, 1800s, dark skin. Same thing you're going to see in ancient Egypt. We'll get into this. I talked about this on YouTube, by the way. But you'll see it. Go back and you look at a lot of those early pictures from the 1800s, the ones they had, because camera just got, created. And I believe it was 1826, we started getting the first successful photos. And yeah, later in that century, the 19th century, we started getting more photos from the end of the 1800s. But it's a lot of photos out there. But when you see the photos from the early 1900s and up, you still see those people being dark skinned. One of the biggest surprises people shouldn't be surprised about is understanding, one, how these people, you have Asians, Mongoloid, they call them, how they spread when they came down from Alaska. This is the Mongoloid shaped skull. I talked about this before, which would be the Asian shaped skull. They didn't just stop in America. They kept going. Migration pattern takes them all over. And then they would settle in those parts of, Peru and Panama and all that, and Hawaii. And Hawaii is one of the ones that we can see clearly because the Hawaiian royal family was clearly, Black. But I'm going to read here. It says, the Black people themselves are an ethnological puzzle. Many, like the Tasmanians who were exterminated by English settlers, were pure Blacks. The Australian Aborigines were also very dark with African features and curly hair. The basic strain of the original Hawaiian or Hawaiians, as seen in their color and their faces, writes historian J.A. Rogers in Sex and Race, Negro-Caucasian mixing in all ages and all lands was undoubtedly Negro with an admixture of Mongolian. And Mongolian, of course, is where the Mongoloid come from, because supposedly the Mongolians, they call them Mongolians, settled China or settled that area and then begin to spread back and forth. But it's Mongoloid shape, they call it, but obviously where Mongolian comes from. These people were of black and brown complexions with wavy or close curled hair, broad facial features, and fine physiques. In short, they had the same physical characteristics as millions of other people who now live in the Pacific Islands. According to one early legend, these early settlers named their new home Hawaii in honor of a chief named Hawaii Loa, who is said to have led the Polynesians to the islands. But the name Hawaii is also recognized as a form of Hawaiki or Hawaiki, the legendary name of the Polynesian homeland to the west. The ancient land of Hawaii was much like in African society. It was a series of lands ruled by strong-willed chiefs or kings who believed that they had descended from gods. No written records of the islands were maintained, so a court genealogist similar to the African griot received names, family exploits, battles, and past glories of a proud people and their royal leaders. Hawaiian life revolved around religious ceremonies. The heiau stone platforms, generally enclosed by stone walls, served the Hawaiians as temples. Inside these centers of worship were a number of objects for ceremonial use and various rituals. They were used on numerous occasions, for to the Hawaiian people, any new undertaking in life was cause for a religious celebration. The principal Hawaiian gods were Cain, life, Lono, harvest, and Ku, war. But we also look at the Funan, the Khmer. These are Asian civilizations, or, they were black. We look at the early Japanese and Chinese and see how dark they was. And of course, here you go with the Hawaiians. And a lot of people have no idea that these pictures even exist and that these Hawaiian royal families were black, clear as day, dark skinned when you look at them. And it goes into what I said before about how they mixed in. I talked about with the Taino and the indigenous people that were in South America, that basically where the Dominicans and Puerto Ricans come from. And the Portuguese came over and mixed in, which the Portuguese is a Romanist language, Portuguese, and all that comes from Rome. This is conquest of Rome. Rome going over and conquering in Spain, where there was black people there. And then, Portuguese is basically a Roman, and, it's Roman. But they came down into South America. We know Columbus and Ponce de Leon and them, and they raped and they pillaged and they mixed in. And again, this is not to offend anybody, as I said on YouTube, and it's just history. It's what people have to know. And there's a lot of people, races of people out there, and they're proud, understandably so, who don't know their history. And they believe that their people, got here on their own. A lot of people do. It's a lot of people who don't study history. They don't give a shit. They just like where they are. They don't care about life. They don't care about what happened or what's out there. To me, if you don't care what's out there, something is wrong with you. But a lot of people don't know. And it's not to offend anybody, but you have to understand a lot of these races of people only came to be due to the conquest of white folks. Plain and simple. You don't get, the light Dominicans and Puerto Ricans. You don't get these people until the Europeans go out and conquer and rape. So a lot of these races are a product of that. Unfortunately, it's the truth of their history. And then they have history after that. So it's one of the things that we understand, but we like to let people know, you come from us and this is our land, that we were here first. If you want to get to that whole thing, but we were, in fact, here before anybody. But when you look at the pictures of these people, especially the Polynesians and the Panamanians, and how dark skinned these people was before Europeans mixed in, it really shows you what happened. When I was in Egypt, I wasn't shocked to see black Egyptians. I was shocked to see that there was so many of them, and how, the camera is just never on these people. And it's something that I knew from the first time I went, but you go there, like I said, you see. But, it just goes to show you how much the Arabs took over and conquered those lands, because they're few and, far in between, when you see them. But when you go and start looking at the older photos of Egypt, and you look at those old archaeologists from France and in Europe, as you can see here, I mean, look at the skin color of these people, of these Egyptians. It's dark and it's black. And as I talked about on YouTube, he was showing me in the photo how they took the color off, and how every single one of those hieroglyphs that has color, the color was originally pitch black, and it was diluted for a reason. Now, red skin is something that we did. Red skin is just not, native to Indians in America. That comes from us. You can see that, in ancient Egypt and even in India, we put the red clay. It's different meanings for the red clay on the body, what that means, but it's still African. It still belongs to black folks. But when you go again and look at a lot of these older photos, I'm talking about the early 1900s, late 1800s, it's dark skin. These people over here are black skin. And like he told me, they came, they put the solution. You guys can see the photos. You can see them, as I showed you guys, them in there working on this stuff and taking off the black skin. And to hear it from, one of the Arab people in Egypt, them understanding what happened and them telling me, it's crazy. So I made sure they didn't want to talk, of course, on camera. And they didn't speak really good English. One of the things, because I've been, working on my Arabic for years now, so I can understand a little bit. But one of the things that, it's tough for them, it's tough for them to get money over there. So they don't really want to mess up what they got going on and put themselves out there. So I understand it's tough for them to accept one, but to even talk about. But when you go into some of those rooms in there, you can see it. You can see where, some of the darkness is coming off. When you look at a lot of these earlier depictions from China, and you can see where they basically took off the dark skin on a lot of these Chinese photos. You can see where there was not photos, but statues. And you can see throughout history how it changed from the dark skin to the light skin. So we know, whitewashed. Came in, and for many reasons, they did this. They changed this. Now, again, talk about Sheikh Anta Diop. He was, if you follow the man, he was adamant. This French guy did not play. And he took it really personally and serious that they were doing this. And he's a real researcher. And he said, clear as day, it's easy in other places I went to try to prove if this is black skin, if the people were black. Only need a little teeny, piece of the skin, and we could settle this whole thing right now. I don't understand how anybody, especially with photos like this going around, if you actually did the research as a white person, how you can think this was a white civilization before the Ptolemies. Because it wasn't even a white civilization with the Ptolemies there, because they couldn't stay there that long, which we'll get into in a second. But of course, just by their own definition of skull shapes, the Sphinx is clearly black. It's African. And they know they can't survive there. But he talked about the Chaldeans and how Herodotus talked about they were black, and so many other people talked about these people. You have Pindar in one of his poems talk about how, Jason and the Argonauts, they fought the Chaldeans and that whole story, and the Chaldeans were black. And they are referenced in a lot of different things. But as I talked about before, Herodotus mentions the Egyptians as black. Diodorus Siculus mentions them as being black. And everybody who was historians back then, it's not a question of what color they was. And then again, as I show you, we can go and look at the history of the people and then go and see where we fled to and how we see ancient Egyptian culture in Nigeria, in Libya, in Ethiopia, and those parts of Africa where we fled to and continued that culture. You can see where this land is. Well, Chaldean, it's close to Georgia, near Russia. And how talked about the black Russians there. We can see these people in Russia a lot, but we're going to get into why this deeper in a second. But yeah, we were everywhere, and we were seen and we were known because this region was full of black people. Plain and simple. There's no way around that. So we have pictures, and we understand, and the Russians understand about the black people that's in Russia still to this day, and that was there before them. This is, of course, the land that was conquered during the wars of the Diadochi, because once they, this was happening anyway during the time they were still fighting with Egypt. So this whole land we see that the Romans and Greeks conquered, or a major part of Europe, and we were there. Of course, black people there. So we're talking about the Chaldeans over there in Georgia. We can keep going up further. Serbia and all these lands that we see where white folks, Europeans inhabit today, we were there. This was our land. And the wars of the Diadochi is them going out and conquering this land and enslaving the people. You can't even imagine, what must have took place back then. But there was a lot of us fleeing in many different directions when this was going on. We fled into Lower Africa. We fled over to Europe. We fled to many different places, and they followed us. and we were enslaved, we were killed, and this was what was happening, this is what they was doing to us. Now, whenever I usually get into conversations about Egypt, start talking deeply about it, we got so many haters. So even with the Black Hebrews, they say the same thing, but then white folks say, oh, well, Sumer or Sumeria is older than ancient Egypt. Y'all talk about ancient Egypt too much. What about the Sumerians? And then it's like, what about the Sumerians? They were Black as well. And to get into arguments with people about this is hilarious, because it makes you realize how much people don't know and how much simple reading will fix a lot of problems, especially for people who claim to believe in the Bible and say that the Bible is true. So we know the oldest civilization in Sumeria is dated to about 2750 BC, right? We have artifacts over 4000 BC from Egypt. We have the Narma Pile, that was one of the oldest artifacts on the planet. And we know that when it comes to comparison, the two civilizations, Egypt kills, because there's so much there and there's still so much we haven't even found yet compared to Sumeria. But just like Egypt and Sumeria, you have researchers and archaeologists that differ on the date. The date is not the point. The point is which civilization is taken from and used and talked about more than any other civilization in recorded history, and it's Egypt. And everything goes back there. Our religion and, our way of life today, stuff that we use today, still came from them. It's not much we can go back to Sumeria and say, this is Sumeria, we got it from the Sumerians. But they're used. But even still, if you want to use them, you still have to take it back to Ethiopia, which is where we know both civilizations eventually came up from after whatever happened. As I talk about, something happened, and that seems to be where civilization reestablished itself before it went on this whole migration pattern. But yeah, you just read the Bible. It says Cush begot Nimrod. Where's Cush? Cush is Ethiopia, right? Cush is right there. And Cush is clear as day, Black African land. And this is where Nimrod supposedly had, started his whole, rise to power here. And Diodorus Siculus talks about the Egyptians saying that what they call the people in Sumeria and Babylon or what have you, they called them Egyptian astronomers, that they were, these are Egyptian astronomers. They went and set up civilizations there, and these are people who know what we know. And there's a couple of translations for Sumerians or Sumer, but one of the main translations is black head. That means black head. You'll see that when you go start on research, that's what it means. So clear as day, we can get off of that. It's not whitewashed, but it's them, they're putting doubt into your head about the two civilizations, Egypt and Sumeria. And the reason for this, as I talked about before, is because they don't want us going back in there, and then they made it evil. But they only did this to keep us from going there. So they're under control. They control it. So it's obvious, as I said before, who's beating the Roman Empire, who's beating them. There's no way in the world that the Arabs came into Egypt and took that land from them. Obviously, they established a deal for them to come in there. But you got to look at the fact that you have North Africa, you have Sumeria, you have this whole region stretching from, Morocco all the way over to Israel, all this being African territory. And it is basically the beginning or the cradle of intelligence. This is where philosophy and math and science, all this stuff we find here. So they suck to take it for themselves. So they can say, the major points, which would be, Egypt and Greece and all that, what have you, Rome, where we have these civilizations that are established and known about, that it's them who started all this culture, and they just basically went through our history. And this is very easy to prove, because all they have to do is date these statues and when things sprung up, which we know didn't spring up until the fall of Northern Africa and Egypt. Clearly, we can date it to the time to where you guys came into power and when you took power away from us. But when you go and look at the royal families and people who ruled before them, it's clearly Black. And they married into these families and then eventually took over. And who knows what, cruel fate, fell on the real royal people. And I talked about in Greek mythology and ancient history series about what happened and how they basically bred the Arabs to do what they done. And If they're not going to let us come into Egypt, they have to put somebody there that can stay there to keep us from going in there. And that was the whole point of the Arabs, them allowing the Arabs to come into Egypt, when Rome had control of it, because they didn't want us coming in there. It wasn't that the Arabs beat Rome and came in there. They struck a deal, as I talked about, with this status quo antebellum. And that was part of the deal. But before this, I talked about how the Persians got the keys to the kingdom from the Greeks to come in there and conquer the Egyptians, and that they bred these people